My name is Althea Voss. I am 71 years old and have lived long enough to know that peace often comes from saying nothing. I wake before dawn, the way I always have, moving through my small downstairs suite so quietly that the kettle's whistle sounds louder than it should. The walls remember another time when this used to be my sewing room, and laughter carried down the hall instead of footsteps that avoid me. The floor creaks above. My son, Dax, is already up. He has the same heavy stride his father had, but none of the warmth. His wife, Leonie, keeps the kitchen neat, the bills stacked like soldiers on the counter. Every Sunday night, she writes out the figures, and on Monday mornings, I am expected to do my part. I set my tea on the desk and open my old laptop. The screen glows pale blue against the dim room. Their shared bank ledger is there, the one they made for me, Althea's rent, as if I were some quiet tenant, instead of the woman who once rocked Dax to sleep on this very street. I type the transfer $2,000. Exactly as every month. A few more clicks. Another $350 for utilities. The amount stings a little, but habit dulls pain the way age dulls sound. I tell myself it is fine. I have my space. I am safe. I am. But some mornings, like this one, I can almost hear my late husband whisper, "You built this house for family, not profit." Upstairs, a door slams, and Leonie's voice cuts through the ceiling, sharp, impatient. I sip my tea, pretending not to listen. The sun begins to rise, lighting the corner of the deed framed inside my desk drawer. They have never asked about it. The kettle cools. The day begins. And above me, the counting of lights and bills continues, steady as a clock that no one dares to reset. By mid-morning, the house is alive with footsteps and noise. Dax stands by the refrigerator, scrolling on his phone while Leonie sorts through envelopes on the counter. I pour my tea again, careful not to clink the spoon. "Mom," Dax says without looking up, "the electric bill's ridiculous this month. Were you leaving your space heater on overnight again?" His tone has that clipped edge that once belonged to a teenager asking for gas money. I start to explain that I only use the heater before bed, but Leonie cuts in with a small laugh. "Old folks get cold easier, honey. They love keeping the lights on too, it's comforting." She means it as a joke, but it lands like a bruise. I nod, pretending to agree. Dax sighs and taps the screen. "Just try to be mindful, okay? Power rates went up again. I promise I will. It's easier than arguing, outside. The air smells faintly of salt and magnolia. The neighborhood looks the same as it did 20 years ago, yet not the same at all. The houses wear new coats of pale blue paint and modern shutters. Young couples push strollers, and work vans from renovation crews line the curb. Charleston has grown louder, shinier, more expensive. As I step onto the porch to empty my teacup, Harlan Bishop from next door waves over the fence. He's retired from the Navy, still tall and spry. "Morning. Miss Althea, did you hear the Right Place sold last week? $900,000? Can you believe that Charleston price has gone mad?" I offer a polite smile. "That much." "Yep. Cash buyer, too. Folks from Atlanta." He chuckles, shaking his head. "Wish I'd bought 2 houses back in the day." When he disappears into his garage, I stand a moment longer, letting the number echo in my mind, $900,000. Inside, Leonie is calling for help with the laundry, her voice brisk and certain. I close the porch door behind me and carry the thought upstairs like a quiet secret, careful not to let it show on my face. That evening, after the house settles and the last light upstairs goes dark, I unlock the drawer beside my bed. The key is small and cold between my fingers, tied with a bit of red ribbon so I will not lose it. Inside lies a cedar box, the size of a shoebox. Its surface worn smooth by years of opening and closing in secret. The faint scent of cedar and paper greets me. sharp and comforting. On top sits a photograph of my husband, Walter, in his work overalls, smiling as if he still believes life is simple. Beneath it, folded and refolded, is the deed to this house, our house, stamped and notarized in my name. I bought it 20 years ago, though no one knows that except me and the man who signed the closing papers. I remember the year clearly, 2003. The company where I had spent half my life sewing pattern prototypes finally settled the patent dispute in my favor. It was not a fortune, but more than enough $200,000 after taxes. At the time, Dax and his sister were already chasing comfort faster than they could earn it. New cars, loans, big talk about starting a business. Every call seemed to circle back to money. Walter had been gone only 2 years then, and I wanted something that would not vanish into arguments or debts. So I bought this house quietly through a trust, telling everyone it was a small inheritance from Walter's cousin. It was easier to let them believe a story that didn't involve me protecting myself from my own children. I traced the embossed stamp with my thumb, feeling the grooves like a pulse. All these years, I told myself it was for their good that one day, when they were steady, I'd tell them the truth, but the words never came, and the years slipped by, carrying my courage with them. I only wanted to keep something safe. I whisper, folding the papers once more. The drawer closes with a soft click that sounds almost like relief. The sound started as a rattle deep in the walls, followed by a rush of water that turned the hallway floor into a slick, spreading puddle. By the time I reached the laundry room, the water heater was hissing like an angry animal. Dax stood there barefoot, cursing under his breath, holding a wrench he didn't know how to use. "Mom, what did you do?" he shouted over the noise. "You've been running that thing nonstop, haven't you?" I shook my head, already reaching for the main valve. "It's old, Dax. It needs replacing." He glared, wet hair clinging to his forehead. "Everything breaks around here because you keep overusing it. We can't afford this kind of damage. You'll need to pay more next month. Another $500 should cover it." The words settled heavy in the air. "500 more," I said quietly. "You already have my rent, my part of the utilities." He cut me off. "Then pay the rent or get out. I can't keep covering your costs. Mom, you're not a guest here. You live here. You need to contribute like everyone else." Leonie appeared in the doorway, arms folded, eyes wide with silent approval. I could see the tiredness behind her look, but no kindness. I felt something in me go still. I set my teacup on the counter beside the dripping towels, the porcelain trembling faintly against the wood. "All right," I said. "I understand." He stared at me, uncertain whether I meant it. I didn't explain. Some words don't deserve answers. That night, when the house had gone quiet and the scent of bleach still hung in the air, I opened my bedside drawer again. Between old bills and sewing needles lay a cream-colored business card. Quentin Park Charleston Realty Group. I slid it free and ran my finger across the embossed letters. The paper was thick, steady, the kind made to hold signatures that change lives. The cafe on Wentworth Street smelled of roasted beans and sea air drifting through the open window. I sat near the corner, hands folded around my cup, until Quentin Park arrived tall, polished. The kind of man who spoke in numbers and calm assurances. He checked the address I'd written on a folded slip of paper, glanced at me, and then looked again. "You're the owner of that property." "I am," I said evenly, "and I'd like to sell it quietly. No sign, no online listing, private showings only." His brows lifted, but professionalism returned as quick as breath. "Of course. I can list it under a trust if you prefer discretion. Voss Family Trust." I answered. "It's already registered." He took notes, his pen gliding across the form. "Condition sound, original roof, plumbing replaced 6 years ago. I'm selling it as is. No repairs, no contingencies." He nodded thoughtfully. "You'll get offers fast." especially in Charleston right now. I'd price it at around $840,000. Cash buyers will love a clean deed and quick closing. We can arrange a 14-day escrow if everything checks out. The number lingered like sunlight on water bright. Impossible. Real. For a moment, I saw Dax and Leonie's kitchen, the rent ledger on the counter, the damp towels from the broken heater. Then I let the image go. "I'll sign whatever you need," I said. "Just make sure my name stays private until closing." He slid the contract across the table, and I wrote my signature in a careful hand that didn't shake. When it was done, Quentin gathered the papers and smiled faintly. "You're remarkably calm for someone selling her home." "I've had a long time to think about it," I said. By late afternoon, I was walking the edge of Colonial Lake, a small apartment key warm in my pocket. The water reflected the sky like glass. Still and pale. I would stay there only a few weeks, I told myself, just until the sale was done. The air smelled of salt and beginning. 2 mornings after I moved into the small studio near Colonial Lake, Quentin called to confirm the sale had gone through. A clean cash offer. Full price. Closing in 3 weeks. His tone was calm, practiced, as if we were discussing groceries. By noon, the notice was posted on the front door of the house I had once called home. The paper was neat and official, with black letters across white property sold, 60-day vacate period required. I could almost picture Leonie finding it, her manicured hand frozen mid-reach for the mail, the color draining from her face. When my phone finally rang that evening, it wasn't Dax, it was my granddaughter. "Tamsin. Grandma, Mom's freaking out. She says someone bought the house. Is that true?" I stirred the pot of soup on the stove, the faint smell of carrots and thyme rising into the quiet. "That's what the notice says," I told her gently. "She said it came out of nowhere." Tamsin continued. "Dad's furious. He thinks some investor swooped in and tricked them. He's been calling lawyers all afternoon." I leaned against the counter, the phone warm in my hand. The truth pressed at the edges of my mouth but didn't escape. "Tell your parents to read the notice carefully," I said. There was a pause. "Are you okay, Grandma?" I looked around the studio. The single lamp glowed soft against the pale walls. My boxes were stacked neatly by the window, and a small potted fern sat on the table. The air smelled clean. Not like paint or bleach or fear. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I just needed a little space to breathe." She hesitated, then whispered, "Mom's crying." "I know," I said quietly. "It's been a long time coming." When the call ended, I sat down at the small table with my bowl of soup. The spoon clinked softly against the rim, steady and slow. Outside, the evening light reflected on the water beyond the trees, golden and calm. It felt like the world had exhaled, and I could finally hear my own breathing again. I heard the pounding on my door before I even reached the kettle. 3 sharp knocks, followed by Dax's voice, ragged and furious. "Mom, open up." When I did, he was already halfway inside, waving the folded notice in his hand. His face was red, his jaw tight. "They're evicting us 60 days. Do you even care what's happening?" I set the kettle down, the soft clatter filling the silence between us. "Come in," I said quietly. He didn't sit. He stood near the small table, looking around the modest apartment as if it were evidence of betrayal. "You move out for 1 week, and suddenly we're losing our home. You couldn't have picked a worse time." Leonie's in tears. Tamsin's confused. "What kind of mess did you start?" "I didn't start anything." I said, "Sit down, Dax." He didn't. He ran a hand through his hair, his breathing quick and uneven. "The realtor won't say who the seller is. All he'd tell me is that the deal's already done. Who would sell out from under us?" I walked to the dresser, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the small cedar box. The hinges creaked softly as I lifted the lid. Inside were my husband's photo and a folded document wrapped in plastic. I laid it flat on the table and smoothed the edges. Dax looked down, confused at first. Then his eyes caught the line of text near the top. Title owner Althea Voss. No one's evicting you, I said, my voice steady. I sold my own house. He stared at the paper as if it might vanish. Your house. His voice cracked. You've been this whole time. You made me believe I let you believe what you wanted to, I said softly. You said pay rent or get out. So I paid. Then I got out. Dax's mouth opened, but no sound came. He stepped back once, twice, his fingers still gripping the notice as if it might anchor him. When the door closed behind him, the sound was gentle, almost careful, like something breaking slowly instead of all at once. Leonie came the next morning, her knock hesitant but sharp enough to break the quiet. She stood in the doorway with swollen eyes and trembling hands. Her voice caught somewhere between accusation and heartbreak. How could you do this, Althea? We opened our home to you. You lived under our roof, I corrected gently, and you didn't open it. I built it. Tears slipped down her face, but her anger burned through them. You lied to us for 20 years. You let us think you were barely getting by. I motioned for her to sit, but she didn't. Instead, I set the kettle on the stove and spoke into the rising hum. After your father died, I received a settlement from his textile patent. It wasn't much then, but enough to buy that house outright. I didn't tell you because every time I helped, the money disappeared. I wanted one thing that couldn't be wasted. Leonie's breath hitched. So you punished us instead. I protected what was left, I said. And when Dax told me to pay or get out, I decided to take him at his word. Her expression hardened. But before she could speak, the door opened again. Dax stood there, pale and drained, the anger replaced by disbelief. You sold the house without a word. That's cruel, Mom. I turned from the stove, met his eyes. You asked me to leave, I said softly. So I did. He exhaled, a sound closer to defeat than fury. Then he turned and walked out. Leonie followed after a long pause. Her footsteps hollow down the hall. An hour later, there was another knock, gentler this time. Tamsin stood holding a paper bag of groceries, her hair windblown, her eyes steady. She stepped inside without speaking, unpacked bread, apples, and a small jar of jam. When she finally looked at me, she smiled faintly. You didn't betray us. Grandma, she said. You just stopped letting them. I reached for her hand. The kettle whistled, soft and even. And for the first time in weeks, the sound didn't make me flinch. The cottage in Mount Pleasant was smaller than anything I had lived in before, but it felt like a place meant to hold peace. Not noise. One story. White shutters. A porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a clay pot of rosemary. I paid for it outright, no loans, no signatures to chase, no debts tied to anyone's expectations. The deed bore only my name. When the inspector finished his checklist, he smiled and said, "This one's got good bones." I smiled back. So did I. My days began quietly. Morning walks through the shaded streets, the air smelling faintly of the salt marsh. The library club met on Wednesdays, and I started going. Sitting with women my age who still believed stories could mend things. In the afternoons, I tended the small patch of garden behind the house. Rosemary, mint, and a few tomato plants. It wasn't much, but it grew. One Friday, Tamsin arrived after her college classes, bringing a paper bag of pastries. She looked around with wide eyes, her smile both proud and sad. "It suits you," she said. I poured us tea and handed her a thin folder I'd kept beside the ledger. Inside was a document stamped with a lawyer's seal. "It's a small trust," I told her, "for your education and whatever comes after." I set it up in your name alone. She blinked, confused. You didn't have to. I wanted to, I said, and don't tell your parents. Let this one stay kind. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment I saw the same spark her grandfather once carried hope without hunger. She reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine. As the afternoon light shifted across the floor, the house felt settled, breathing around us. I had sold one life to make another. And somehow, in the quiet rhythm of that choice, I had begun to feel whole again. The message arrived just after dusk. While the sky was still holding on to its last trace of gold, I was rinsing a teacup when the phone buzzed on the counter. Dax's name appeared on the screen, followed by a short line of text. I didn't know what I was saying that day. I read it twice before setting the phone down. There was no apology. Not in the way people usually mean it. But there was something quieter beneath the words, an opening. Small, but real. I wiped my hands on a towel, typed my reply slowly. Neither did I. Take care of your family. The message sent. And I didn't wait for his answer. Some things are meant to settle on their own, like soil after rain. Outside, the air was soft and warm. The rosemary by the porch steps brushed against my skirt as I moved. I had spent the afternoon polishing a small brass plaque I'd ordered from a craftsman downtown. The letters gleamed against the dark wood as I screwed it beside the front door. Welcome by respect. The last light of the day caught its surface, and for a moment I saw my reflection in it, lined, calm, and steady. The wind carried the faint toll of church bells from across the marsh. I sat down on the porch chair, tea cooling beside me. The house quiet, in that honest way new houses are before they fill with memory. I thought of Tamsin, of the trust that would one day help her build her own beginning. I thought of Dax and Leonie, of the lessons that might take years to bloom. The porch light clicked on as the evening deepened, spilling a warm circle over the steps. I leaned back, watching the glow touch the garden. The rosemary, the brass plaque. Peace had not come easily, and it would not stay without care. But as I sat there listening to the low hum of the night, I knew how to keep it. Peace wasn't surrender, it was maintenance.